This is Chapter 1. At Tier 3, the challenge is no longer knowing what to recommend. The challenge is knowing how decisions actually break when pressure is present, and how to prevent that breakdown before it costs the shop time, money, and trust. By the time an advisor reaches this level, they already know how to explain repairs. They already know how to be polite, professional, and technically accurate. What most have never been trained to see is how quickly pressure inside the shop changes the environment of a decision, and how that environment determines whether approvals hold or collapse later. Pressure doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in through pace, tone, and sequencing. It shows up when the phones won't stop ringing, when a technician is standing at the counter waiting for direction, when the schedule is tight and the number on the estimate is higher than the customer expected. In those moments, even good advisors start making small adjustments they don't realize they're making. They talk faster. They compress explanations. They stack information. They try to get to an answer quickly, not because they're careless, but because they want relief from the tension, from the waiting, from the feeling that everything is balanced on this one decision. Those adjustments feel harmless. They're not. They are the beginning of unstable approvals. Tier 3 is where you stop measuring success by whether a customer says yes in the moment and start measuring it by whether that yes survives time, survives the drive home, survives a conversation with a partner, survives a night of second guessing when the pressure of the shop is gone and the customer is back in control of their environment. This is why advanced advisors don't chase approvals. They design decisions. Design means intention. It means you don't rely on personality, instinct, or hope. You don't default to a single sales style and hope the customer fits it. You understand that when pressure rises, structure is the only thing that keeps control from slipping, and control is the foundation of trust. At this level, failure isn't missing a sale. Failure is creating approvals that feel rushed, fragile, or regret-based. Those approvals don't just disappear quietly. They show up later as cancellations, reschedules, disputes, negative reviews, chargebacks, and broken workflow. They steal time from technicians, destabilize schedules, and slowly erode the authority of the front counter. Mastery looks different. Mastery is being calm without being slow, clear without being cold, in control without force. It's knowing how to hold the decision space steady so the customer never feels trapped, even when the truth is heavy and the number is real. That is the standard for Tier 3. This chapter exists to reset how you think about pressure, control, and decision leadership, because once you understand how decisions actually fail, you stop reacting to resistance and start preventing it. That's where this level begins. Structure restores control. Control makes approval stable. At the Tier 3 level, structure is no longer a courtesy, it is the backbone of decision leadership. Without it, even the most accurate recommendation can collapse under pressure. With it, difficult conversations become manageable, and high-dollar decisions stop feeling volatile. Most advisors think structure is about being organized or sounding professional. That's Tier 1 thinking. At Tier 3, structure is about controlling the psychological environment of the decision. When a customer walks into a service drive, they bring uncertainty with them. They don't know what the inspection will reveal. They don't know how serious the issues are. They don't know how much control they're about to lose over their time, money, or plans for the day. Their nervous system is already alert before you say a word. Structure is what tells that nervous system, this is safe. Safe to listen. Safe to ask questions. Safe to make a decision without regret. When structure is missing, customers don't consciously think this advisor is disorganized. Instead, they feel something more subtle and more dangerous. Disorientation. Disorientation makes people defensive. Defensive people delay. Delayed decisions are unstable decisions. This is why rushed conversations fail later instead of immediately. In the moment, the customer may agree just to escape the tension. They may nod, say yes, and even authorize work. But once they leave the environment that pressured them, control returns, and with it, doubt. That's when cancellations happen. That's when approvals fall apart. That's when today's yes becomes tomorrow's problem. Structure prevents that by preserving autonomy. Structure shows the customer where the conversation is going before it gets there. It creates sequence so nothing feels dumped or hidden. It gives the customer a mental map, not a sales pitch. And when people can see the path, they stop bracing for impact. At Tier 3, you don't use structure to push outcomes. You use it to make outcomes durable. That's the shift. You stop asking, how do I get this approved? And you start asking, how do I keep control intact while telling the truth? When control is protected, trust follows. When trust follows, approvals stabilize. And when approvals stabilize, operations stop breaking under pressure. That's why structure isn't optional at this level. It's the difference between surviving busy days and running a shop that holds together when everything is heavy. Now, here's the question that tells you whether structure is really present or whether pressure is running the conversation. Are you leading the decision with structure, or are you rushing the customer into resistance? Most advisors don't realize when they cross this line because resistance rarely looks confrontational. It doesn't show up as anger or accusation. It shows up quietly, politely, and late in the process. I need to think about it. Can you send that to me? Let me talk it over with someone. Those statements are not rejections. They are signals. They signal that the customer no longer feels oriented inside the decision. Something moved too fast. Something arrived out of sequence. Something felt heavier than expected without enough context to support it. The mistake most advisors make is treating these signals as objections to overcome instead of feedback to respect. When they hear hesitation, they speed up. They add more explanation. They try to convince. They repeat themselves louder or longer, believing clarity comes from volume. It doesn't. When a customer feels rushed, their brain shifts out of decision-making mode and into self-protection mode. In that state, information stops landing the way you intend it to. Facts feel like pressure. Evidence feels like persuasion. Even silence feels loaded. This is where resistance is born, not because the recommendation is wrong, but because the process no longer feels fair. Fairness at Tier 3 is not about price. It's about sequence. It's about whether the customer feels heard before being advised, respected before being directed, and in control before being asked to commit. So ask yourself honestly, when hesitation appears, do you slow the structure down or do you try to push through it? Because resistance is not a customer flaw, it is a process failure. And until you treat it that way, it will keep showing up at the worst possible times when the shop is full, the schedule is tight, and you can least afford instability. Hold on to that question. The rest of this chapter exists to answer it. At this point, the question is no longer whether structure matters. The question is how you apply it when pressure is real. Because knowing the idea and executing it under load are two different skills. Pressure doesn't just speed up the shop, it compresses judgment. When bays are stacked and the schedule is tight, the internal math starts running in the background of your head whether you want it to or not. If this doesn't get approved, the bay sits. If the bay sits, the day slips. If the day slips, everything behind it suffers. That internal pressure quietly reshapes how advisors talk. This is where Tier 3 discipline begins. Customers are not resisting the work. They are resisting the feeling of being controlled. The moment they sense that control slipping away, through rush tone, stacked information, or urgency language, their defenses come up. And once defenses are up, the decision is already unstable. This is why Champion draws a hard ethical line at this level. We do not manufacture fear. We do not imply certainty we don't have. We do not use urgency language to borrow consent. Any approval gained through pressure will cost more later in cancellations, disputes, chargebacks, and reputation damage. Unstable approvals poison operations even when the work itself is correct. The first skill is tone regulation. Tone is the thermostat of the conversation. When your tone rises, their defenses rise with it. When your tone stays calm, paced, and deliberate, their control returns. Tier 3 tone is not slow, soft, or passive. It is steady. Even when the shop is on fire, your delivery should signal nothing here requires panic. The second skill is process selection. This is where the Champion decision, Compass TM, comes in. It is not a script, and it is not a personality test. It is a selection system designed to prevent one of the most expensive failures in the service drive, delivering correct work through the wrong experience. Every customer is protecting something: time, control over money, safety, dignity, and trust. Those protections show up in pace, posture, questions, and reactions long before the estimate is discussed. Your job is not to stereotype, it's to observe. 15 to 30 seconds of disciplined attention prevents tone mismatch, which is how honest advisors get labeled pushy. Once you know what the customer's protecting, you choose the delivery process. Relational customers need emotional safety before they can absorb truth. Structured customers need categories and sequence so the information doesn't feel chaotic. Efficiency customers want required first with minimal noise. Educational customers want proof and logic, not reassurance. The third skill is sequencing truth so it feels fair. Fairness stabilizes people. You start with what's good because it proves balance. You address the reason they came because sequence is respect. You move to safety with evidence because safety deserves clarity, not drama. Then repairs, then maintenance. Then a plan that protects the customer's future without demanding they buy all of it today. Evidence is non-negotiable. If it's recommended, it must be supported with photos, measurements, and technician notes translated into human language. Evidence reduces debate, delay, and shopping. It protects time and trust at the same time. Finally, you protect consent with responsible paths. You do not corner customers with a single cliff. You offer two clean options that both respect safety and reality, typically a tow-day required path and a staged plan path. That keeps the customer in control without the shop losing leadership. If the customer declines repeatedly, you do not tighten your grip. You pivot to planning. Planning preserves the relationship, protects future revenue, and prevents your shop from becoming the kind customers warn others about. That is decision leadership under pressure. At the Tier 3 level, what matters most is not how persuasive you sound, it's whether your decisions hold once the pressure is gone. This chapter establishes a clear standard. First, you select process, tone, and benefits intentionally instead of defaulting under stress. You recognize what the customer is protecting, and you match the experience to that need, not to your own comfort level. Second, you sequence truth so control is preserved. You start fair, honor the original concern, prove safety with evidence, and present responsible paths instead of ultimatums. That sequence is what makes honesty feel safe instead of threatening. Third, you measure success by stability, not speed. Stable approvals protect bay rhythm. They protect schedules. They protect technician hours. They protect trust. And trust is the only thing in this industry that compounds instead of decays. When you slow tone without losing authority, when you use structure instead of urgency, when you design decisions instead of chasing yes, pressure stops breaking your operation. The shop stays in rhythm even on heavy days. Customers feel respected instead of hunted. Technicians stop waiting like hostages. And leadership becomes visible in the experience, not just in policy. That is why Tier 3 isn't about being smoother. It's about being safe to follow. The challenge is simple. On your next high-dollar estimate, do not speed up when the number rises. Slow your tone. Keep the sequence. Show the proof. Offer two responsible paths. And pivot to planning before you ever push past consent. That is how you turn pressure into predictability. That is decision leadership.